episode
Yeah.
and key moments in the history of rock and rock visual culture part 2.
This is part two. Yeah. So we can introduce part two because we already did part one. So let's keep on moving. So we left part one spinning some old vinyl from the early to mid 1960s where the shrieks of Beatlemania echoed through stadiums and crackly transistor radios. Back then, rock was sporting tailored suits, but was shedding its cleaned up image for leather jackets, from charming, melodic, and just dangerous and cheeky enough for mums and dads to raise an eyebrow. But I could sense something restless brewing under that pop polish. Couldn't you? The Beatles, caught up in the psychedelic swirl of the counterculture, and Greenwich Village's literary vibe started evolving, with Bob Dylan, a wiry poet from Minnesota who traded its finger pointing folk for electric prophecy. When Dylan plugged in at Newport in 1965, it wasn't just about volume, it was a signal flare. Rock was no longer just about love songs or teen dreams. It could be about protest, identity, God, death, and the spinning confusion of being alive in a changing world. So we can dive into part two. How did rock pass through this major barrier? What do you reckon we'll uncover? In conclusion, from the harmonized innocence of I Want to Hold Your Hand to the jagged confession of Like a Rolling Stone, rock music had opened the door to pass over to the other side, and nothing would ever be quite the same again.
The other side of the moon. Wait, what's happening? Yes, sorry for that, people. Let's have a big hand for the rock visual culture. And what is the key moment of Mr. Bob Dylan, Mr. Meg?
Yeah, 1965, Bob Dylan goes electric at Newport Folk Festival. Folk purists are shocked, but rock music evolves. Rock historians aren't in total agreement as to what precisely went down when Bob Dylan took the stage at the Newport Folk Festival on July 25th, 1965. They all agree, however, that it was a hugely significant night for rock music. Dylan was the champion of the folk music revival of the early 1960s, a traditionally all acoustic movement. So, when he strode onto the stage carrying a Fender Stratocaster rather than his more familiar acoustic guitar, the crowd was not pleased. At the time, Dylan's now classic single, Like a Rolling Stone, was hugely popular on the radio, but folk purists didn't like the song's mix of electric blues and rock and roll. When Dylan and his accompanying backing band, some also wielding electronic instruments, started playing, sections of the crowd started booing. Accounts vary as to the intensity of the crowd's reaction, but Dylan played only 3 songs before leaving the stage. The folk purists expected him to stay acoustic and pure. Here's what he played during that electric set: Maggie's Farm, Like a Rolling Stone, and Phantom Engineer, which was an early version of what would later become It Takes a Lot to Laugh, It Takes a Train to Cry. Those 3 songs were performed with an electric band featuring members of the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, like Mike Bloomfield on electric guitar and Jerome Arnold on bass and Al Cooper on organ. The reaction was immediate and intense: loud booing, some stunned silence, and a general sense that Dylan had just detonated a bomb in the middle of the folk movement. There are 2 main reactions. Some people booed because of the sound quality, it was rough, but a lot of the anger was because Dylan seemed to be turning his back on the traditional folk scene. He left after his electric set, but when Dylan returned, he performed 2 songs on acoustic guitar: Mr. Tambourine Man, followed by It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, and then left for good. In conclusion, it was an edgy night by most accounts, but a pivotal moment in the development of folk rock, expanding the bounds of rock and roll.
Mr. Mick, after the Beatles, what key moment did the Rolling Stones contribute to the British invasion?
In 1965, the Rolling Stones release I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Gritty, rebellious rock becomes global, and the British invasion changes rock music forever. In 1965, the Rolling Stones unleashed I Can't Get No Satisfaction, and rock music was never the same. From the instantly recognizable fuzzed out guitar riff to Mick Jagger's snarling vocals, The song captured a gritty, restless energy that felt rawer and more dangerous than anything else on the charts. It wasn't just another love song, it was a howl of frustration and rebellion, perfectly timed for a generation starting to question authority and traditional expectations. Keith Richards' distorted riff, born from a half asleep demo on a cassette recorder, became one of the most iconic sounds in rock history. Satisfaction marked a turning point when the British invasion stopped being polite and fully embraced its rebellious side. The Beatles had opened the door, but the Stones kicked it off the hinges. Suddenly, rock music wasn't just fun, it was confrontational, sexual, and deeply tied to youth identity. Satisfaction didn't just top charts in America and around the world, it lit a fire that made rock and roll feel like the voice of an entire, restless, revolutionary generation. Other than the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, major bands that emerged during the British invasion included The Who, The Kinks, The Animals, The Yardbirds, Herman's Hermits, The Hollies, Jerry and the Pacemakers, and Manfred Mann. Bands like the Dave Clark Five, The Zombies, and Them, featuring a young Van Morrison, also made a big splash, each bringing their spin on rhythm and blues, pop, and rock sounds to American audiences hungry for something new. The flood of British groups between 1964 and 1966 completely reshaped the American charts and cultural landscape. As the British bands dominated American airwaves, American musicians quickly started imitating the British sound to stay relevant. Garage bands popped up all across the US, inspired by the raw energy and cool attitude of groups like the Beatles and the Kinks. You can hear the influence in jangly guitar tones, blues driven riffs, marching suits, and the shift towards more rebellious lyrics. Bands like the Byrds, Paul Revere and the Raiders, and even the Monkees were all shaped by the British template, blending it with American folk, surf rock, and R&B roots. The British invasion didn't just conquer America, it forced American rock to evolve, creating a back and forth musical conversation that pushed the entire genre into exciting new directions. And there's a short list of key American bands that rose in direct response to the British invasion: the Byrds, the Monkees, Paul Revere and the Raiders, the Lovin' Spoonful, the Turtles, the Beau Brummels, Sir Douglas Quintet, and all these bands, along with countless garage bands in small towns all across the country, didn't just copy the Brits. In conclusion, these bands often took the energy and spirit of the British invasion and fused it with their American influences, leading to a whole new genre like folk rock, psychedelic rock, and garage rock.
Very well said, Mr. Mick. And let's have a big, big hand to the Beatles and for all those iconic rock and roll bands. And what was the iconic moment for the burning a guitar, Mr. Mike?
1967, Jimi Hendrix burns his guitar at the Monterey Pop Festival, and psychedelia reaches new heights and shocks mainstream America. In June 1967, the Monterey Pop Festival became the stage for a moment that would sear itself into rock and roll history. Jimi Hendrix, a virtuoso guitarist with a wild mane and an even wilder sound, didn't just play his set, he unleashed a sonic and visual spectacle that left jaws on the floor. As he tore through Wild Thing, his fingers dancing across the fretboard, he suddenly doused his guitar in lighter fluid, set it ablaze, and smashed it to pieces, the flames licking the air while the crowd roared in a mix of awe and disbelief. This wasn't just a performance, it was a primal act of rebellion, a punch in the nose to the buttoned up norms of mainstream America. For a generation already buzzing with the summer of love psychedelic vibes, Hendrix's fiery sacrifice was a rallying cry. Art could be raw, disruptive, and unapologetically fierce. That burning guitar shocked the establishment, which saw it as reckless destruction, but the kids in the tie dye and beads, it was pure liberation. Monterey was already a melting pot of countercultural energy, with Janis Joplin, The Who, and Otis Redding redefining music's possibilities, but Hendrix took it to another plane. Hendrix's act wasn't random chaos. It was a deliberate fusion of showmanship and defiance, rooted in the era's hunger for overcoming war, racism, and conformity. In conclusion, the image of those flames became a symbol of psychedelia's peak, capturing a moment when music wasn't just heard, but felt like a jolt to the soul.
What arguably the defining key statement of rock music, Mr. Mac?
The Beatles released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. In 1967, Paul McCartney played the Beatles' latest album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Band Club Band, to Bob Dylan's response to this. Oh, I get it. You don't want to be cute anymore. He was right. The Fab Four had turned a creative corner. Deciding that live performances and screaming fans weren't enough, they wanted to become a serious studio band. And with Sgt. Pepper's, the Beatles announced to the world that they were true artists. The album was revolutionary. Regarded by many as the first concept album, it is bursting with creativity and musical innovation, featuring French horns, tape loops, bass harmonicas, harpsichords, sitars, and more. The album changed not only rock music, but pop culture itself. When the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in 1967, it wasn't just another album. It was a cultural event that changed how people thought about rock music. Up until that point, rock albums were often just collections of singles and filler songs. But Sgt. Pepper arrived as a unified, intentional work of art with songs that flowed together, themes that threaded across tracks, and a strikingly imaginative cover that suggested something much bigger than pop music. It showed that a rock album could be a full artistic statement, not just a product to sell. The experimentation with sounds, styles, and studio effects pushed the boundaries of what was even possible in popular music. Sgt. Pepper didn't come out of nowhere. The seeds of that revolutionary spirit were planted in Rubber Soul 1965 and Revolver 1966. Rubber Soul showed the first real break from formula with songs that explored deeper emotions, new sounds like sitar on Norwegian wood, and a growing seriousness about lyrics and craft. Revolver took that experimentation even further with bold studio techniques, tape loops, backwards recordings, and philosophical lyrics that moved rock into a more imaginative and sophisticated realm. Without the creative breakthroughs on Rubber Soul and Revolver, Sgt. Pepper would never have been possible. Those earlier albums were the Beatles' way of breaking free of pop expectations and finding their artistic voice. Historically, Sgt. Pepper stands as the moment when rock music fully declared itself an art form. It paved the way for the idea of the concept album, influenced everything from progressive rock to glam, and inspired countless musicians to think bigger about what albums could accomplish. It also tied rock music more closely to the broader cultural movements of the 1960s: psychedelia, social revolution, and youth driven change. One indication of how important the album was lay in the fact that Jimi Hendrix honored the Beatles by acknowledging their achievement of the LP by playing Sgt. Pepper's live 4 days after its release. In conclusion, Sgt. Pepper wasn't just about making better songs, it was about expanding the very possibilities of what rock and roll could mean.
Sergeant Pepper, indeed. Thank you so much for your legacy to the world. How did the West Coast sound of San Francisco follow Sergeant Pepper, Mr. Mac?
In 1967, the summer of love, San Francisco becomes ground zero for countercultural and psychedelic rock. Bear in mind how Sgt. Pepper connects to the summer of love just a few weeks later. It's a cool piece of context. When Sgt. Pepper's dropped in June 1967, it landed right at the heart of the summer of love. Young people across America and Europe were already gathering around ideas of peace, love, and counterculture, but Sgt. Pepper gave the moment its perfect soundtrack. Its colorful, experimental spirit captured the feeling that a new world was possible, a world where creativity, freedom, and community could triumph over the old ways. Songs like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and With a Little Help from My Friends didn't just mirror the psychedelic energy of the moment, they helped define it. In many ways, Sgt. Pepper and the Summer of Love are forever intertwined as two sides of the same cultural explosion. San Francisco becomes ground zero for counterculture and psychedelic rock. San Francisco became the beating heart of a musical revolution that felt like a love letter to freedom and experimentation. The San Francisco sound, born in the Haight Ashbury haze, wasn't just a genre, it was a vibe, blending psychedelic rock, folk, blues, and a touch of cosmic wonderlust. Bands like Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead, my personal favorite, Creedence Clearwater Revival, and Big Brother and the Holding Company, with Janis Joplin's raw wail, crafted tunes that broke all the rules of pop's tidy, lovey dovey 3 minute hits. Think surrealistic Pillow or Live Dead. Songs and albums swirled like a tie dye dream, inviting listeners to lose themselves in the groove. This sound didn't just fill smoky venues like the Fillmore or the Avalon Ballroom. It became the soundtrack of a counterculture, fueling the summer of love and giving voice to a generation itching to ditch conformity for something wilder and truer. The San Francisco Sound's influence rippled far beyond those foggy Bay Area nights. It rewrote what music could be, inspiring artists to take risks and chase authenticity over commercial polish, paving the way for everything from jam bands to prog rock. More than that, it carried a spirit of community and rebellion that shaped culture itself, from Woodstock's muddy fields to today's festival scenes. The Dead's endless tours and fan driven ethos, that's what the San Francisco Sound's DNA, still alive in every parking lot tailgate. And when Janice belted Piece of My Heart, it wasn't just a song, it was raw, unfiltered cry that showed the world music could be as messy and real as life. In conclusion, even now, that sound whispers to anyone craving a little freedom: plug in, let go, and see where the music takes you.
Let go, people, let go. Very well said, Mr. Nick. What was the rock opera revolution?
1969, The Who's Tommy and the Rock Opera Revolution. Let's hop to 1969, shall we, where The Who took rock to a whole new stage with Tommy, the first world rock opera. I remember hearing Pinball Wizard blaring from my buddy Rod's record player, and it felt like a story unfolding, not just a tune. Pete Townsend crafted this tale of a deaf, dumb, and blind kid who finds genius through pinball, blending rock's raw edge with theatrical ambition. With Roger Daltrey's soaring vocals, Keith Moon's thunderous drums, and John Entwistle's bass foundation, it wasn't just music, it was an epic. Released in May, Tommy hit number 4 on the Billboard 200, proving rock could tell operatic narratives. This wasn't just a fluke, mind you. The Who had been pushing boundaries since my generation, but Tommy was a leap. Think of it as rock's answer to a West End play. It inspired Broadway runs and a 1975 film showing how rock could merge with art forms. For a generation questioning war and identity, Tommy offered a mirror. Couldn't we all just find our own pinball wizard within? The album's success paved the way for concept albums like The Wall, blending rebellion with reflection. Even now, when I hear those opening chords, it's a nudge to dream bigger. Rock wasn't just noise, it was a canvas. Fittingly, The Who performed live in its entirety at the entire Tommy set at Woodstock at around 5 a.m., no less, just before the sun rose and Townsend famously kicked Abby Hoffman off the stage mid rant. Rock history was being made in stereo. In conclusion, what do you think? Didn't Tommy redefine rock's soul?
Indeed, redefined, Mr. Nick. And thank you for your legacy to the world. What was the peak of the 60s festival and counterculture?
1969, Woodstock Music and Art Fair, the peak of the 1960s rock era and countercultural spirit. On August 15th, 1969, 32 acts and more than 400,000 attendees arrived at Max Yasgur's dairy farm in Bethel, New York for 3 days of peace, love, drugs, and most importantly, rock and roll. It was immediately obvious that the festival was going to be big, but no one knew just how iconic Woodstock would become. Despite various technical difficulties, food shortages, and bad weather, the festival became a living embodiment of the 1960s countercultural. As for the lineup, it was quite something. The Who, Carlos Santana, Jefferson Airplane, Janis Joplin, Sly and the Family Stone, The Grateful Dead, The Band, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Joan Baez, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, to name a few. And then there was Jimi Hendrix, who gave arguably the most iconic performance of the entire festival with his stirring feedback fueled rendition of the Star Spangled Banner. And who was the master of ceremonies? none other than the incomparable Chipmunk and the subject of one of my book projects. Picture a muddy field in Bethel, New York, August 69, where 500,000 people showed up with little more than a dream and a love for music. Woodstock wasn't just a concert, it was a raw, chaotic celebration of what happens when folks dare to imagine a world unbound by rules or divisions. Kids with flowers in their hair danced under the rain, sharing food, blankets, and hope, while legends like Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin poured their souls into songs that echoed far beyond the stage. It was a fleeting moment when a generation said, "We can be free, we can be together," proving that music could spark something bigger than itself, a shared heartbeat of peace and rebellion. But Woodstock's magic wasn't just in the music or in the crowds, it was in how it flipped the script on what society thought was possible. In a world tangled up in Vietnam, civil rights struggles, and Cold War fears, this festival was an in your face of the status quo. People didn't just listen to Joan Baez or The Who, they lived the lyrics, building a temporary utopia where love trumped hate and differences didn't divide. Sure, the logistics were a mess: traffic jams, food shortages, and sanitation nightmares. But that only made it more human. Strangers became family, helping each other through the mud and madness, showing that even in chaos, we can create something beautiful if we lean into trust and togetherness. Decades later, Woodstock's legacy is like a nostalgic love letter we keep rereading. It reminds us that art can shake things up. There's a bunch of dreamers can rewrite the rules, even if it is just for a weekend. It wasn't perfect. Some say it romanticized the counterculture or ignored its flaws, but that's what makes it so vital. Woodstock captured the messy, hopeful spirit of people craving change, and its echo lives on in every festival, protest, or moment when we gather to sing, shout, or stand for something bigger. In conclusion, it's a nudge to keep chasing that wild, muddy, music soaked vision of a world where we all belong, no matter how crazy the dream might seem.
What the key moment was the end of an era, Mr. Meg?
1970, the Beatles break up, the end of rock's first royal family. In 1970, the world felt like a seismic crack when the Beatles, rock's first royal family, called it quits. It was like watching a fairy tale unravel. John, Paul, George, and Ringo, who'd spun Beatlemania magic from the Ed Sullivan Show to global stadiums, the rock revolution of Sgt. Pepper's, were done. The breakup wasn't just one moment, but a slow burn of bruised egos, legal issues, clashing visions, and life pulling them apart. John Lennon, chasing love and avant garde dreams with Yoko Ono, walked away first in 69, whispering his exit to the band like a secret divorce. By April, Paul McCartney made it official with a press release tied to his solo album, a move that felt both like a cry for freedom and a jab at his old mates. Fans mobbed Apple Records, hearts broken, while headlines screamed betrayal. Yet, amid the mess, money fights, creative drifts, the ghost of manager Brian Epstein, their final albums, Abbey Road and Let It Be, still glimmered with genius, proof that even as they fractured, their spark was eternal. The Beatles split didn't just end a band, it reshaped rock music and ended the dream. Each Beatle wandered into solo paths: Paul's homespun McCartney, John's raw Plastic Ono band, George's religiously soulful All Things Must Pass, Ringo's crooning sentimental journey, showing that they were ready to outgrow the four Fabs' shadow. In this case, the breakup's ache lingered, fueling decades of reunion rumors and nostalgia. It was the end of an era where four lads could unite the world with a chord, yet it birthed a new one where artists dared to chase their voices. The best video capturing the 1970s Beatles breakup is The Beatles Get Back 2021, a three-part Disney Plus documentary directed by Peter Jackson. Jackson, spanning over 7 hours, it restores nearly 60 hours of unseen footage from the 1969 Let It Be sessions, showing the band's creative joy, simmering tensions, and human moments. John joking, Paul directing, George bristling, Ringo steady. Unlike the dour 1970 Let It Be film, it paints a vivid, balanced portrait of their final days with the iconic rooftop concert as a bittersweet farewell. The film offers a revisionist history of the final days. In conclusion, the Fab Four were no more, just as the 70s began.
The Fab For no more. And thank you again for your legacy. After the Beatles, Mr. Nick, after the Beatles, was that the end of rock?
Well, 1971, Led Zeppelin releases Four, featuring Stairway to Heaven. Rock takes on a mythic, harder edge. In November 1971, Led Zeppelin dropped their fourth album, an untitled masterpiece we now call Four, and it hit the world like a thunderbolt wrapped in velvet. With Stairway to Heaven as its crown jewel, the record wasn't just music, it was a mythic journey, blending Robert Plant's mystical wail, Jimmy Page's searing riffs, John Bonham's primal drums, and John Paul Jones' soulful keys. Stairway started as a gentle folk whisper and climbed to a roaring, otherworldly climax, becoming rock's ultimate anthem, the one you'd hear blaring from every radio and record player. From the gritty stomp of Black Dog to the ethereal ache of Going to California, Four carved out a harder, deeper edge for rock, proving it could be both raw and poetic like a Viking saga told in a smoky bar. The album's impact was seismic, not just for its sound, but for how it reshaped what rock could mean. Four sold over 37 million copies worldwide, cementing Led Zeppelin as the gods of the genre. But it also set a new bar for ambition. Bands didn't just want hits or release just singles, they wanted epics. Stairway to Heaven became a cultural touchstone, played at dances, debated by critics, and scribbled into countless notebook margins, its cryptic lyrics sparking endless quests for meaning. The San Francisco Sound's psychedelic sprawl got a muscular cousin in Zeppelin's blend of blues, folk, and raw power, influencing everyone from Black Sabbath to Pearl Jam. Even now, when those opening chords of Stairway drift through a room, it's like a spell, pulling us back to a time instantly recognizable. Love it or think it's overplayed, you can never dismiss it. The best video capturing the essence of Led Zeppelin's Four and Stairway to Heaven is Led Zeppelin, The Song Remains the Same from 1976, specifically the 1973 Madison Square Garden performance of Stairway to Heaven. This concert film, while flawed, showcases the band at their peak, Page's wizard like guitar work, Plant's charismatic strut, and the song's live music. In conclusion, the Stairway segment captures its mythic build and raw energy, reflecting Four's harder edge.
Harder edge. Yes, 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 yes. What was rock's cosmic depth?
Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and rock's cosmic depth. We can drift to 1973, where Pink Floyd dropped Dark Side of the Moon, a record that turned rock on its cosmic odyssey. I was mesmerized the first time I heard Money on the headphones with its quirky cash register beat, feeling like it peeled back life's layers. Released in March, it topped the Billboard 200 for a week and stayed on the chart for 741 weeks. That's over 14 years. With David Gilmour's haunting guitar, Roger Waters' lyrical depth on time, death, and madness, and that iconic prism cover, it was rock reimagined as philosophy. This wasn't just an album, it was a statement. Building on Sgt. Pepper's studio magic, Darkside used tape loops, synths, voices, and heartbeats to explore the human condition, perfect for a 70s world grappling with Vietnam's end and social shifts. It sold over 45 million copies, influencing progressive rock and anthem music, showing that rock could be both cerebral and emotional. For me, it's a reminder that music can hold space for our struggles. Don't you feel that? Its legacy lives on in every band daring to blend sound with meaning. In conclusion, could Dark Side be rock's cosmic revolution?
The dark side. Indeed. Who showed that the singer songwriter and performing aspect of rock was not over?
1975, Bruce Springsteen releases Born to Run, a sweeping American rock anthem for a new generation. In August 1975, Bruce Springsteen roared onto the scene with Born to Run, a record that felt like a lightning bolt wrapped in Jersey swagger. This wasn't just an album, it was a love letter to the restless dreamers of America's backstreets, with Springsteen as their poet laureate. The title track, Born to Run, was a heart pounding anthem, its specter like wall of sound, saxophones blaring, guitars churning, and Bruce's gritty voice pleading, capturing the ache of youth desperate to break free from small town life. Tracks like Thunder Road and Jungle Land painted cinematic tales of lovers, loners, cars, and late night drives in diners, blending rock's raw energy with a storyteller's soul. Springsteen gave a new generation a sweeping blue collar rallying cry that escaped a dead end town and screamed, "We're chasing the American dream for ourselves." Born to Run didn't just launch Springsteen to stardom, landing him on the covers of Time and Newsweek in the same week. It redefined what rock could be. It bridged the San Francisco communal sounds, communal spirit, and Led Zeppelin's mythic tales, but grounded it in the grit of American life, gas stations, boardwalks, and the hope of a better tomorrow. The album's lush production and heartfelt lyrics inspired countless artists, from Tom Petty to Arcade Fire, to weave personal stories into universal anthems. Its influence still echoes in every bar band, belting out tales of struggle and redemption. When you hear that opening riff of Born to Run, it's like the road opens up, inviting you to floor it towards your horizon, no matter where you're from. In conclusion, Springsteen didn't just make music, he gave American youth a ticket to acknowledge that, baby, we were born to run.
Baby, we born this way. Across the pond, who promoted anarchy and the punk's raw power, Mr. Meg?
The Sex Pistols' Anarchy in the UK and Punk's Raw Power. We jump to 1976, where the Sex Pistols unleashed Anarchy in the UK, a sonic Molotov cocktail that lit the punk fuse. I recall hearing the earliest bootleg of Johnny Rotten's Snarl, raw, angry, and brilliant, and thinking, this is rock stripped bare. Released in November, it barely charted due to bans, but its impact was massive, kicking off punk's do it yourself ethos. With Steve Jones's jagged guitar and Paul Cook's relentless drums, it was a middle finger to the bloated rock mainstream of the 70s, demanding change against a backdrop of economic gloom. Punk wasn't polished, it was rebellion in sound, rejecting the prog rock excess for three chord fury. Anarchy's lyrics, I am the Antichrist, I am an anarchist, captured a generation's rage, influencing The Clash and Green Day. For me, it proved rock could be a weapon, not just art. Don't you see? Its legacy is in punk's ethos of accessibility, still echoing in indie scenes today. In conclusion, wasn't it anarchy that sparked and burned rock's old guard?
Indeed. To sum up, what key medium introduced rock visuals, Mr. Meg?
In 1981, MTV launches Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles plays first. A new era of video rock and music culture begins. Just after midnight on August 1st, 1981, MTV, the world's first television channel devoted to showing music videos, launched with the announcement, ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll. As the station went on air, the first video broadcast on the fledgling channel was, fittingly, Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. Despite some initial hope and interest, MTV struggled in its early years, in part due to a lack of music videos. But as it expanded its programming, MTV took off in a major way. By the mid 1980s, it was having a major cultural impact, not only on music and TV, but also on movies and advertising. Record companies began noting video's effect on record sales, and soon the channel was launching the careers of newcomers such as Prince, Cyndi Lauper, and Duran Duran, and turning the likes of Madonna and Michael Jackson into global superstars. Music videos became big business, and MTV's adaptation of grunge and rap in the 1990s brought about a major shift in popular music. In conclusion, rock and visuals were now part of general culture.
Indeed. And let's celebrate about that. Thank you for your legacy to the world. To sum up our part two of rock and roll, Mr. Mick, we now, or where we are now?
Well, we can wrap up this reflection on rock's wild side. It kicked off with the early 50s like a rebellious teen crashing a posh party. Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good, 1958, with its swaggering riffs, Little Richard's Tutti Frutti, 1955, screaming raw energy, and Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel, 1956, bridging races with hip shaking charm. The 60s saw the British invasion, Beatles and Rolling Stones, and Dylan's Electric Jolt at Newport 65, while the San Francisco Sound and Hendrix's Monterey Blaze in 67 turned rock into art. The 70s roared with Led Zeppelin's Four, Springsteen's Born to Run, and Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, blending myth, dreams, and cosmic depth, before punk's Anarchy in the UK stripped it bare. By 1981, MTV's launch with the video Killed the Radio Star made visuals king, sparking debates on style versus substance. For me, rock's journey from gritty roots to global juggernaut mirrors our own search for identity and freedom. It shaped how we move, feel, and connect, from Woodstock's muddy fields to today's streaming playlists. So, what does rock mean to you now? Share a memory, maybe a song that changed you, because this story's not done. It's a nudge to keep rocking, exploring, and pushing boundaries, just as it did from those first rock and roll chords to the very moment. In conclusion, from rock and roll's first chords to MTV's neon glow, rock and roll grew from a gritty uprising to a cultural juggernaut, forever changing how we see, hear, and move. The end, or is it? As the Who sang, rock is dead, long live rock.
Long live rock! Indeed, long live rock. The history of rock and roll and its evolution into rock is marked by systemic cultural moments intrinsically tied to its visual identity. Mr. Mick, another great episode on Music 101. Would you like to plug in something?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. You can always listen to me on the Doctor of Digital podcast and also on School, where I have a new course on book writing and being a book doctor. That's School, Skool. So if you want more information on that, get in touch. I'll help you out there. Also got a couple books on Amazon, Learning America, and also on track Ian Hunter.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Mick because if you support him, more and more empowering authors to come, and of course, empowering books to come. I'm looking forward for Miss Arida Franklin. Miss Arida
Someday.
coming soon. But people, I'm inviting you to please do listen to our BB podcast, Mental Health 101. Mental Health 101 is created to empower our mental health awareness. Mr. Mick, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my friend, Mr. Daniel. Till next time, Deus Volt.
Bodycon people, see you soon.